I think it's no secret that one of my favorite watch micro brands is Vario. And not just because Ivan and Judy are awesome people to work with, but also because they put a lot of work into their designs. They also elicit a lot of feedback from the watch community even before the watch leaves the design phase and goes into production. Today I have for you a watch that is a passion project. I have heard some comments over the past few months about how this is a ripoff of another flipping watch, but it isn't. It might take some inspiration, but I can guarantee you that this is something that Ivan specifically really wanted to see happen. He took a gamble, he took a risk, doing something outside the norm, and I think that you're going to flip for it. This is the Versa by Vario Watches. I want to begin by showing you how they shipped this to me in one of these fantastic Vario watch pods. These are really handy to have laying around. They're very good quality. I've had one for years that I use all the time. It comes wrapped in this little bag. And there we go. There's your Versa. So the chances are that by now you've seen the Versa. And so I just want to point out to you the things that really stood out to me when I first saw it. As you can see, this is a very different styled watch. It's just about as thick as the strap, just slightly thicker. It does have a nice Vario strap. I do like these straps a lot. This one comes, of course, with a deployant style on it. Vario there. It's a little small for me. All of the Vario products are a little small for me. Ivan does size them for himself in many ways, and I can't blame him for doing that. Now, the dial itself is very striking. This side is black. It has the 4 screws at the corners, but the inside is just a little bit gray. The outside is sort of brushed, sort of textured, and then the inner rectangle is more of a flat black. You can see that the leaf hands are very delicate. As you would expect in a watch like this, there's a lot of polished surfaces on the top, but when you get to the side, you'll see that there are a lot of brushed surfaces as well. So in many ways, this doesn't present just as a dressy piece. You could definitely wear it as a dressy piece, but with the screws showing, with the brushing on the sides, there's another pivot there. You're going to see that it could actually be dressed down quite a bit as well. I could see this with jeans and a t-shirt nicely. The brushing and the finishing continues on as you begin to flip this watch as well. Notice that there's different finishes on the outside and then this inner band running in the middle. And then if we flip it over, now we have the white side. Now you notice that this side does not have the screws as the other side does. The screws are only on one side of the watch. So this side is just a little bit dressier in my opinion. I'm going to admit that I was a little bit surprised to see just how kind of plain this white version was, especially because I was expecting this. You might see here on their website, the white side has the same dial as black. Then I looked a little more closely and I realized that this is off black because this is the gunmetal version. So in the gunmetal version of the Versa, we do have that white side and the gray side here, or gunmetal side as it were. So originally this one does present as a little bit black, but it actually is gunmetal. And while we have the website up, why not take a look at some of the colorways? They have a silver and red version, silver and black. This one, gunmetal, they call it a whitewash. So you can see here that actually the inside of the silver is silver. Interesting. There's a blue and silver, and then there is a green and silver. On my website, you can see here, it comes up as 591 Canadian dollars. And a lot of these colorways are sold out, but I'm told that there's more coming for a number of the colorways. You'll have to contact Vario to find out which. So speaking of the dial, if I'm to look at this white dial, I would say it's not my favorite. I love the blued hands, but I really feel like there's something missing. There's just a little too much white dead space. Of course, that is a personal preference. This one, I prefer a lot more. I would have preferred if this pattern were on both sides of the watch. But of course, This is personal taste, and I think Ivan was trying to go for something quite simple. The next thing to notice is that this is a very rectangular, blocky watch, but it also is rounded in many ways. It's hard to really pin down, is this a square watch or is this a round watch? You have curves here, beveled edge here, you've got nice curves here on the corners. It's not sharp, it's not angular. You have your crown up here to change the time, which of course is circular. So it's really a mix of both. Speaking of changing the time, I find it's easiest if you do pull it up into this position, pull out the crown, and then you can simply adjust your time at will. The nice thing about this is it's quartz, but there's no second hand. So you can set this and it's going to be running accurately for months. Now, one of the questions that I've had is how do they keep from scratching the interior of the watch itself on the watch frame? And if you look, you'll see there are absolutely no scratches. Very interesting. And I flipped this thing so many times, it's not scratching. If you look carefully, you're going to find that on the outside of the interior portion, there's a little bump. And on the inside, there's a little detent. And so as it makes its way through, that little bump sort of pushes the watch and guides it so that there is a fraction of a millimeter between the watch and the frame of the watch. It's actually a pretty ingenious plan because what it does is it also locks it into place. So when it's on your wrist, it's not going to move around. Now, a lot of detail has gone into this watch, but there's one detail that is sorely missing. And it's something I always look for because when I was in high school, I thought I was going to be an electrician. And one of the things they always taught you is when you go to the light switch and you're putting that cover back on the light switch after doing your electrical job, always make sure the screws line up. It's just a small touch. And if you look on this watch, this screw, and this screw, they all seem to point into the corner, which I quite like. But this one here, it's going in a different direction. And to me, it just makes it feel a little bit unfinished. In fact, if this were my watch, I'd probably break out a small screwdriver and see if I could just loosen it or tighten it just a little bit in order to make sure that they all matched. Another thing that keeps jumping out at me is just how flat the bottom of the watch is when it's sitting on your wrist and how the top portion protrudes kind of like a stepped pyramid. What I think would be kind of cool is if they actually moved the hinge pin down just a little bit so that a portion of the step was also below the case. If you look at just about any watch, you're going to see that there are at least a few millimeters of case back on your wrist. We're used to this. In fact, we find it comfortable. And so I don't know why Vario couldn't do this. I believe they are in a phase 2. I'm sure they're making improvements on this. And that would be one suggestion. Now, of course, I didn't design it or manufacture it. Maybe they did try that and found that it didn't work, but it's just an idea. And I don't know if it matters, but it is something to note that the strap sits fairly high on the case. The holes for the lugs are pretty high up into the case. Of course, it doesn't really affect wearability, and it still looks pretty great on the wrist. Now, speaking about putting this on the wrist, throwing it on my 8.5-inch wrist, we're going to find that this just doesn't quite fit. In fact, I had a hard time even getting it done up over my chunky wrist. And it sort of wears more like a bracelet with a large charm than it does a standard watch. Now, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. It's not a bad thing at all. But I myself, if I were going to pull this off, I would prefer it if it were a little bit larger. I'd love to see this come in a standard and a large size. I would totally rock this design. I think it's super cool. But unfortunately for me, the strap isn't quite long enough and the watch itself isn't quite big enough. But I guarantee you that very few people out there have an 8.5-inch wrist and need to worry about this. I think for most people, this is going to fit really well. And since we're talking about dimensions, I want to break out my calipers here for you to show you exactly the sizing on this because it can be kind of hard to wrap your head around. So it's 25.5 this way, and this way, looking at 39. You're looking at 12 millimeters in thickness. If you measure just the case, you're looking at 8.9 millimeters. You can do the math on that one. Your lug width is 20 millimeters, as you'd expect. I don't know if I pointed this out earlier, but the crown is signed. And I should say, the crowns are signed on this one. Oh, this is the Gunmetal Versa by Vario. Which side is your favorite? Which colorway is your favorite? Would you wear a watch like this? Do you think it's a ripoff, or can you see Vario's own ingenuity in this design? I certainly can. I'd like to thank the good people at Vario for passing this along to me, and I want to thank all of you for watching. If you're looking for more great affordable watch content, then why not check out one of these videos down below.